So welcome, good afternoon. Great to see a number of you turning out this afternoon. A lot of familiar faces and even more unfamiliar faces. First off, show of hands for those of you, if this is your first reInvent. Wow, so quite a few. That's great, excellent. Hopefully you're learning a lot and meeting a lot of new people. Also, show of hands if you from outside of the US. Excellent. Okay. So my name is Robert Cohen. I'm a partner sales leader at AWS and a partner sales leader based in San Francisco. Not sure if we've got, let me get that first slide up. I thought that was. So based in San Francisco, and I lead a team of partner sales managers. And partner sales managers, this team is deeply embedded with the sales team, the AWS sales team, working very, very closely with those sellers and with partners, really to drive great outcomes for our customers. It was interesting. I must tell you one story. I told my son, my youngest, that I was presenting today, and his kind of text back to me was, "Dad, just speak like Steve Jobs." So I'm going to try and channel my inner Steve Jobs. I don't know if that's great advice or not, but I thought it was kind of funny. Anyway, I want to also introduce Rich Yule from One Strategy, Premier Partner with us, and Stephen Garden, who's from Onica, also a Premier Partner. And they're going to be sharing some of their stories as we go through the day and these 9 best practices that we're going to introduce. One of the things that I've noticed that is very, very different from anything else that I've done in my career is, this cloud space is very, very different. It's very different for our customers. Just the pace of innovation and what they're able to achieve with these great technologies, these 125 different services that AWS has to offer. And it really allows customers to focus on their core strengths while using these technologies, with your help hopefully, but using these technologies to drive their own competitive advantage and differentiate themselves from others. But it not only has an impact on customers, but it's also got an impact on our partner community. And the 2 core sort of things that I've seen, one is I get to deal with a lot of different partners. Some of them are very new startups who are building businesses. They're entrepreneurs, and they're building businesses around the AWS opportunity. And then also sort of some very large companies, large global systems integrators, large global consulting firms. And both are having to reinvent and do things very differently, but especially some of those more traditional kind of partners are having to change their business models and do things very, very differently. And the thing that I always get asked by all different types of partners is, what can I do to be more successful around AWS and around this cloud opportunity? Are there some best practices, tips or tricks that you can suggest that would help us in our journey? And so what we're going to introduce here is these 9 best practices. 9 best practices that really have come from some of the input that I've got from partners over the years of having worked at Amazon for 4 years now, and just seeing sort of how some partners can really adapt to this new world and new way of doing things, whereas others, it's a little bit more difficult. So hopefully you can apply these to your business. But before we get into any of the principles, at Amazon we have a set of leadership principles that guide everything we do. Whether it's solving complex problems, whether it's coming up with new ideas, but also as we work with our customers and our partners. And you guys have probably read about some of those principles. But one of the principles is think big. And I want to introduce, $50 million. It's a big number. And I do believe I've seen in my journey with AWS, I've seen a number of companies, from small entrepreneurs that have started building a business around AWS, or even within a division of one of these larger companies that I've spoken about. But just seeing their ability to be able to create incredible revenue streams around this opportunity. And I strongly believe whether you're an entrepreneur in South Africa, or you're an entrepreneur in Sweden, or you're a part of one of these larger organizations, it's really, really critical that you set yourself a big, audacious goal. And we didn't just pull this number out of the hat. There are a number of partners that we work with, that I work with on a day-to-day basis, who've already gone from zero to this kind of revenue pretty rapidly. And I think, as you sit and think about the journey, use this as your North Star, use this as the guiding light, and let's dive into some of the ideas as to how we can develop and achieve against this Think Big goal. So the one thing that I really enjoy about reInvent, and coming here each year and listening to, like the Andy Jassy keynote this morning, or whether it's Werner Vogel's, I think his session's still upcoming, but it's just hearing all of these new services that get announced every year. Really exciting to hear about those. But for me, the most exciting part of this is to actually think about, what are our customers going to do with these services that get announced? And see the innovation of how customers and partners take these new technologies, these new services that we offer, and really come up with some really, changing the world kind of approaches and changing their business and doing things very, very differently. Just one example that I'll give, and it's one sort of pretty close to my heart, but is a few years back, Andy announced Recognition. Great technology, and one of the customers, the International Center for Exploited and Missing Children, has actually taken that technology and is now, that's a core part to how they are scouring the internet on a regular basis and using AI and ML to identify, and use it in cases where they're trying to look for these exploited or missing children. And there's so many other examples. Even today, if you listen to the announcements of this week, around the robotics announcements and some of these satellite things, just imagine what is going to be possible. And I don't think we've even thought of some of these applications that are possible by using these technologies. But this rapid innovation and the scale of innovation from AWS, it's a great opportunity. 125 services, and customers need your help. They really need your help in, how do we use these technologies, and what's best practice in using these technologies? Have you actually implemented them before? And they're looking for great partners who have that experience and who can help them in that journey to the cloud, or that journey to, whether it's IoT or ML or any of the other sort of cool technologies that they can use. It's an opportunity, but it's also a challenge for you as a partner, because there's a lot up there. There are a lot of services to get to know. And I think the partners that we've seen who've been most successful are the partners who've really focused down on a core set of those services and focused on the ones that, they have a lot of depth in those services and can really bring that excellence and that specialization to bear for their customers. So that's the opportunity. So let's introduce our first best practice. And that first best practice is really around getting to know the AWS team and the field team that you're going to be interacting with and working with. Because no matter what country you're in, there's probably some sort of AWS presence that is, sales teams or sort of marketing teams or whatever they are, and sellers who are in that market. And sometimes, different countries have different models and different sort of ways of doing things. But it's important that you identify, just a few people. There are a few people on the partner team who are instrumental in helping you navigate your journey with AWS and who can help you to truly be successful. And they're also your advocates, because as you are learning and sort of helping customers and driving these positive outcomes for these customers, these are teams that can actually help you in that journey. And I want to introduce just 3 of those roles, the first being the Partner Development Manager. And as I introduce these, the terms are pretty standard worldwide. You'll hear about a Partner Development Manager or a PDM in most countries. Sometimes these roles get blended into one role, or these 3 roles are one person. But they are pretty universal across worldwide. And the other part of it is that as you are developing your partnership with AWS, as you're moving up in the tiers and you're developing your certifications, you'll find that you get more and more access because you become more and more interesting to these teams and they really will be there to help you in your journey. So the first, this PDM, Partner Development Manager. The PDM is really there to help you build out your practice, build your relationship with AWS, help you connect to the right people within the organization. And again, they can be your advocate within AWS. And most partners, you can gain access. Sometimes it's by telephone or sort of remote contact. But there are teams that you can gain access to who can really help you and advise you as to, look, step one, get to that sort of initial tier, because that'll get you sort of to that more interesting point where you're going to start getting more and more of the resource that's available. The second role that I want to talk about is the Partner Sales Manager, also called Partner Success Manager in other parts of the world. And the Partner Sales Manager, that's actually the team that I run out of San Francisco, and I've got a team of these guys with the sales team. And these are the guys who are really working on specific opportunities. These are the guys who, as you are navigating an opportunity, they can help you with, these are the right people to speak to, hey, let's take this approach. They can also sort of work with you on how we create opportunities. I'll be talking a little bit more about, about the role and how you can leverage it. And then the final role that I want to introduce of the three is the Partner Solutions Architect, the PSA. And these are technical resources. The Partner Solutions Architect, these are deeply technical resources who really understand the AWS services. And one of the cool things about them is that they are supporting the PDMs and the PSMs, and indirectly you guys as well, as you're working with customers, as you're coming up with architectures and designs and statements of work, and also sort of as you're sort of navigating an implementation within a project. These guys are an invaluable technical resource that can help guide and nurture you in that journey. So that's the first one, getting to know these three team members. There are loads of other sort of people, as you probably run into a few of them, but these are three critical sort of roles that I really encourage you to seek out, go and find them, and they can really help you on this journey. So number two, probably comes as no surprise that it's all around customer obsession and understanding the customer. Cloud is different. I know it probably comes as no surprise to you guys, but customers have a choice in this world. It's very unlike anything that I've sold, especially in the enterprise software space. And I think the core sort of difference is that we really have to win and re-win our customers every single day, every single hour. We don't just sort of, hey, here's the product, here's the implementation, and we run like hell. We've got to really sort of make sure that ongoing trust is there, that the product is delivering on what their expectation is, that we're optimizing their environment, and we're really helping them in terms of how they're using these services. The good part of this is that customers they can move more quickly, and it's not like selling anything that you've sold in the past. But what you'll see also as you're working with the AWS team, and also as you're working with some of the best, what we see from some of our best partners, is we really are focused on solving customer challenges, the customer issues that they have. And we really want to drive business outcomes for these customers. And you're going to see, because of that, you're going to see a different set of behaviors from these AWS teams and from these partners. We're thinking about a long-term relationship, a trusted relationship, and again, one that we have to win and re-win every day. And so you'll see, some of the different things you'll see is you won't see us typically, driving to go and sell something at the end of a quarter or sell at the end of the year, because that may not be good for the customer. It's probably unlikely to be good for the customer. What we're much more interested in is making sure that we're continuing to solve and build the trust in the platform, because by doing that, we know that their usage is going to increase, we know that their trust in us is going to increase, and we'll build this long-term, sustained kind of relationship with the customer. But critical to solving for the customer and being customer obsessed is understanding your customer. And as this principle describes, or this best practice describes, knowing your customer creates opportunity. Excuse me. And so I'll give you an example. One of the things that we've done pretty extensively in North America recently is running these brainstorming sessions around customer situations. So what we do is, either the partner on their own are driving some of these sessions. Sometimes we even do them together. But it's a combination of saying, what is the customer trying to do? What is the customer trying to solve? Looking at things like 10Ks, looking at the latest presentation from their CEO of this organization, and then looking at some of these technologies where we have a good understanding together of, and coming up with, what is the message that we could take to this customer of how we could go and solve some of those challenges. And we've seen this be super successful in driving new opportunities and also in building your own credibility with that customer audience. But I think the best way to explain this is with an example. And who better to explain that than Rich? Rich has a good example of how he's done this with one of his customers in really knowing the customer and solving for those challenges.
Awesome. Thanks. Just by way of quick introduction, my name is Rich Ewell. I'm the founder of One Strategy. We're an AWS exclusive consulting partner. We focus on helping our customers with their journey to AWS, optimizing on AWS, and really that's the core of who we are. Prior to that, I actually used to work for Amazon Web Services, so I feel like I'm amongst family when I'm with them. I was an enterprise solutions architect in the Pacific Northwest, helping enterprise customers with their journey to AWS. My background had been in consulting, and I felt that there was a gap in the market, and so I decided to start One Strategy to address some of those gaps that I felt that were there. I will tell you just a little bit about this solution selling idea. I absolutely believe that it's no longer enough to take a technology to a customer. Previously in my career and in consulting, we would pitch with a technology, talk about a specific technology to be able to address a business problem. I no longer believe that that's really an effective way, and I feel that you need to bring a customer a solution. One of my favorite examples of this is actually with a customer of ours, the Seattle Times. We had engaged with the Seattle Times. We'd done an architecture review, which I'll tell you a little bit more about later. But with them, we had not engaged for a little while. And so the account team and I got together and discussed, what are some of the things that we could do to really benefit and get the attention of this customer about these new services that had come out since the last time that we had engaged with them. As we worked with the various roles, including some of the ones that Rob had mentioned, we sat down and we brainstormed an idea. The idea that we really kind of came up with was that we wanted to take Alexa and enable the Seattle Times with Alexa. There was some challenges as we kind of came to that decision. We did this without the customer knowing. So the idea was to build a solution that we could then take to the customer, pitch this idea to them, and out of that show the value of our partnership and capabilities. So we ran into challenges around API and some other various things. But when we finished this up, we scheduled a meeting with the CTO. Honestly, in my career, that's one of my favorite meetings that I've ever been to. We sat down, we scheduled a meeting with very little information saying, hey, we'd love to just talk to you about some new technologies that AWS has. And we sat down and demoed this skill. I'll tell you about the skill. You would essentially say, Alexa, ask Seattle Times for the top news stories. During the demo, I had that. I pulled the screen open, and it showed the top news stories off of their webpage. It would read the stories by title, and then you could say, Alexa, read me story number 5. At which point, it would go out to the content, pull that content live, and start reading you the news for that story and that content. The response that we got was classic. I absolutely loved it. The CTO said, wow, you have my attention. Right? The message that she got was that there is these technologies that are out there. She said, this is something we've been thinking about and have thought about. We asked some questions. We discussed, what was the approach we took and the technologies that were involved in the solution. Out of that, the conversation just naturally shifted. The next statement and some of those things were, okay, I really appreciate this is fabulous. I'm very interested in working in this space, but I have these other challenges that I would love to talk to you about, right? So the conversation, even though we went in with one technology, shifted into an entirely different set of technologies and challenges. And I guess the point that I want to make is the approach being different is what changes the conversation. Whether or not that's something that customer uses in a direct way or not is not so much the point. But we showed ultimately the customer that we cared about them and we cared about their business. They understood that it cost time and money to build the solution. And out of that, we also showed that we understood the Seattle Times is a business about content. And the delivery of that content was the piece that we felt that there was AWS technologies to benefit them from. With that, I'll turn it back over to you, Rob.
Thanks, Rich. I think it's a great example. So the other part of this is how do you build this kind of approach into your total sales approach and build almost like a sales process around around AWS and around this kind of solution selling. And I think, Stephen, you've really created a structure and a framework as to how you've done this at Onica. I'd love to hear about that.
Sure. Thanks, Rob. Are we on here?
Yep.
Okay, I can shout as well. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Glad you made it to day 3 of the event. I know it's quite a challenge. This is actually going to be my 5th reInvent conference, so I've learned a few tricks of the trade. I've pretty much memorized the entire floor plan of the Venetian casino, so I know where all the escape routes are. So I'm with Onica. We're an all-in AWS partner. We founded the company about just a little over 4 or 5 years ago now, with the idea being that a lot of customers would want to move to AWS and they would need some support and help in doing that. Fast forward today, we're about 300 people now across North America. We're still 100% focused on AWS. We've worked with something like 1,000 customers during that time, and they've consumed probably just over $500 million of AWS. So we've really kind of seen this motion play out, and we've kind of enabled and grown our sales team and taught them some of the best practices that we've seen with regards to kind of how you take customers on this journey. I'm a salesman by background, so kind of winning business is one of my favorite topics to talk about. Before I was working with AWS, I was actually in the traditional outsourcing world, which is a very, very different kind of sales motion. You're kind of trying to go out there and scope the entire thing and get customers to commit to long periods of time and large contracts to build data centers and do this whole package right from the get-go. And I think that was the thing that we really kind of realized straight away was not going to be successful with the cloud. So this drawing here is kind of trying to show the 2 key steps to how we've actually been able to adjust our approach and have a lot more success with customers. So the first thing that we do when we're teaching our sales team how to kind of interact and master Onica's services is actually really nothing to do with what Onica does, and it's everything to do with what AWS is all about. So we like to try and train our teams to be able to sell AWS the same way that AWS actually sells AWS. So, and the good news is there's a lot of resources, a lot of availability of people that will help you kind of learn that motion. But the first step that we see with almost every customer that we're talking to, and these are large enterprises, kind of upper mid-market segment of customers, is they have different options. They can look at multiple different cloud platforms. They can consider building their own data centers still. It doesn't really happen much anymore. But the first part of the sales process and the first win, unfortunately, has nothing to do with Onica and there's no real financial outcome. The first win is just getting through that kind of first step with the customer to say, okay, I trust you. I understand enough about AWS now to see the benefits. I'm ready to kind of take the plunge and kick something off. And like I said, there's no way really in what I've seen across these 1,000 or more customer engagements we've had to go in there and just win the entire customer's business straight in one motion. You really need to create this kind of cycle. So that's when we kind of then train the sales team to actually start engaging around what Onica does. So the first piece is really picking a solution. I think Rich just gave a great example there about an Alexa skill. Going in there, taking something within Amazon's very broad portfolio of services, and go and just do something. Go deliver some value. Show the customer that this is easy. You can experiment, you can move quickly, and you can get something done. And then once you've delivered the solution and shown some value and earned some revenue from that, you'll find that the customer will invite you back to do more. As long as you're successful and the deployment has worked and you can demonstrate an outcome, you'll get invited back to kickstart this loop again. And what we've seen with, especially with large enterprises, is that they're really tired of the traditional way of doing business. They don't like this kind of 18-month journey to see whether this solution's going to work or not. They want to show results to their bosses really quickly. They want to keep up with the stock market and deliver value for their shareholders. So being able to accelerate this loop and keep looping back through this and suggesting new solutions and ideas has really been key to growing. And what we found actually is we are able to capture the full pie. We're just doing it piece by piece, and that's definitely been a more successful way. So yeah, my first piece of advice in working with your sales motion and figuring out how to kind of address customers is start really small. Go for those bite-sized pieces and really focus on getting an outcome and a delivery around that.
So let me pick up on that. It's and this brings us sort of from what Stephen was saying is this: you win big when you start small, and this is something, you know, working with some of these, especially the larger, more traditional consulting partners that we work with. It's amazing to see the revelation where they realize that this is how you win business. And it's really critical because so many of them are used to these very large, very complex projects. They want to sell the strategy and get in there and talk about and kill whales, basically, which is, you know, we all want the whale, but very, very different. You know, customers do buy differently in this space. They're not going to buy those big projects up front. And we see time and time again, they do want to see the value, do a small POC. But what it means in your business is that you've got to be prepared to take on some of these small projects. And sometimes they're going to be, you know, do I really want to do a 1-week SOW or a 2-week SOW? Do I really want to do that small project? It's not really that profitable for me. But it's just amazing how if you embrace this, and I've seen so many of the larger NSIs who are now our national partners that we work with, how as they've embraced that and as they've really started to do these smaller projects, how quickly they turn into bigger projects. And I think, again, Rich, you've got some 2 good examples that you can share as to how you guys have done that.
Yeah, absolutely. I had one question I wanted to ask. How many of you guys have filled out an RFP for a customer in the last 12 months? Okay. So in my experience, the days of those things are changing. You know, in my past, I've worked on so many of those. I can't tell you how many there are total. But this is the exact opposite. And let me give you a couple of examples of that. The first one I'm going to tell you about started with a customer of ours, Workfront. This started with probably the most interesting sales lead I've ever had in my life. I got a phone call, a voicemail from the AWS account rep that said, hey, I have this customer. I believe that they absolutely need your help. They're unlikely to ever be anything big or of significant size for you. I don't know if you even want to call them back. Essentially talking me out of this, calling them with this lead, right? And I appreciated the respect for our time and trying to focus our efforts. But up front, I got this heads up. I decided customer obsession is important. I'm going to call this customer and find out for myself. I reached out to this customer, and our first engagement was 20 hours. I kid you not, I signed a 20-hour SOW, thinking to myself, okay, I hope that this turns out to be something more. And it did. The first session, actually, in that delivering value piece, was honestly what I would describe like the worst technical screen you've ever sat in. I sat in a room around a table with 5 individuals, highly technical, and they asked questions for 8 hours straight. We broke for lunch. That was about the extent of the break, and it was question after question after question. They had pages. They probably got the most dollar value for their 20 hours of any of the customers I've ever worked with. But honestly, it established such a level of trust because they saw that in that 8 hours, we could answer 2 months' worth of questions that they had been building. As a result of that, we ended up with multiple teams being referred to us from that one group, right? And they're saying, hey, we have these AWS experts. You need to talk to them. And then from there, we got multiple engagements inside of those groups. So it really started with, yes, a voicemail of this may be nothing for you. But inviting that opportunity was really powerful. So exact opposite of a giant RFP, right? Exact opposite. You then take a look at another one of our customers, In Contact. We started with a small proof of concept. This was like a 2-week project. It was to prove and validate whether or not the infrastructure as a service platform could support their workloads and what it was that they wanted to do. We went through discussions on automation and that, and then there was a second part to it, which was actually to translate the call services engine. And for those of you that don't know what these two businesses are, Workfront's like a workbench management solution as a SaaS, and In Contact does phone services, so similar to like call center services. You know, when you'd call into some service that you would need to speak to somebody and they say this call may be recorded for quality assurance. At the time, this was all going into their data centers being stored on NAS devices. And they really wanted to prove out, can we use S3? Can we use Lambda? Can we use DynamoDB as this engine to really record these calls into this space? So we did a second part of that POC all around that. You know, the piece that if you fast forward on this, it's really pretty awesome because Workfront, for example, 2 years later, that was that account manager's largest customer. So in contrast, that was the account that they were then banking on for helping them to meet their number, right? Started as this such a small one for them. Similar thing with In Contact. You know, they've become one of our largest and most strategic customers and are working through this transformation process and that. So absolutely, I'm a believer of starting small and you will win big. I believe that the effort that you actually go through in this process, as you build trust with a customer, that by saying, I'll do a 20-hour SOW with you, you actually build such a strong connection with them that they ultimately are going to say, okay, I have this much more complex issue that I want to talk to you about. And they essentially went through their RFP. They saw what your capabilities were, but they did it as an engagement. So that's my pitch on those ones, and I absolutely believe in the start small, win big principle.
Thanks, Rich. The next one, this is probably my favorite of all the best practices, and probably sounds a little bit counterintuitive. But I think it's really important that you understand that customer obsession really doesn't mean giving the customer what they ask for. And this is really critical to kind of get your head around. You know, customers are looking for our help, okay? And so often we see, you know, some partners, you know, you want to give the customer what they want. You want to sort of help this customer out. But these customers need help in terms of, you know, these are different sort of methodologies, different approaches, different tools. And sometimes it's going to mean that you're going to have to, you know, they may ask you, okay, take this approach, do this big project, $150,000 statement of work. And you may have to say, look, that's not going to deliver the result that you're expecting, customer. And it may mean that you don't get that statement of work, you don't get that project, you actually lose it. But again, you're going to drive a way better outcome and you're going to have a way more satisfied customer by really challenging them. And this actually came up in you know, I went out and sort of surveyed, chatted to a number of the people in the UK and our team out in Germany and what have you, and just kind of getting some of the feedback. And it was a really recurring theme. And I think this quote actually sums up that, you know, what I'm saying. This comes from one of the practice leads. But again, it really doesn't mean to give them what they're asking for. You really have to challenge them, their ways of doing this, because a lot of these customers, this is not easy for them. They've got a lot of people who have legacy skills. They're going to have to retrain people, you know, people who have natural preference to certain ways of doing things, certain methodologies, and certain, you know, again, sort of technologies that they may use as part of their business. And I think the more we can challenge them and challenge some of those assertions, it's actually a great way of earning much better trust, you know, with those customers longer term. Another interesting one, ask for help, it's a sign of strength. You know, almost every project, you know, you guys who've been implementing know that just about every project will have its challenges. The things that we didn't know about the customer environment, you might run into, figure out that you need additional resources. But really critical in our culture is, and really in the strong relationships that we have with our best partners, it's where things are going even slightly wrong. Put your hand up and, hey, we're a little bit uncertain about this area. Things are a little bit challenging. Or, hey, our guy that we thought was a Redshift expert, well, maybe he's not such a great expert or whatever. And there are resources, those 3 team members that I mentioned, whether it's especially the partner solutions architects, they can help out. They want to see you guys succeed. They want to see you successful. And also part of it is actually transferring some of those skills in the process so that they can help you learn for the next project and, have that continuous improvement. And we learn a lot from our partners as well, because sometimes we get it wrong as well, and we need your help, your speciality, your knowledge of the customer, your depth within that specific industry. And it's very much a collaborative effort. And I think, Stephen, you've built this into the process of how you're working with these different teams. Would love to hear more about that.
Sure. So yeah, that's really been one of kind of the second areas of focus for us, has been figuring out how our sales team and our delivery team working at Onica really partner with AWS to have success. And to be honest, it's a little bit easier when you're an all-in partner. You kind of just start to mirror some of Amazon's leadership principles and values, and you can sort of design your organization around partnering tightly there. But I'm conscious that a lot of people, the AWS business is one part of what they're doing. So I think it's a little bit more complex in those situations. So I was trying to sort of frame my advice around that. And we have definitely found that a connected team of partner and AWS resources has a far higher chance of having success with the customer. AWS, since I've been working with them as a business, has scaled from a couple of thousand people when we first built our partnership up to tens of thousands of people now. And it is a complex organization. It's a very unique organization. It's not many businesses grow and build something this revolutionary. So using the resources that Rob mentioned and kind of understanding the roles, both in the partner community within Amazon, but also the product teams and the sales teams, and piecing all of that together to kind of figure out how best to tackle a challenge with a customer is really quite key. And when I talk to people that are new to partnering with Amazon and building their businesses, they're sometimes worried about competition. Okay, we also maybe work with Microsoft and other people like that. So there's some worries there about how does Amazon's offerings overlap with our offerings as a partner. And it's difficult. I think it really comes down to learning how to earn trust and building that relationship with both teams. So the approach that we took was very transparent. Let's just lay cards on the table, and sometimes customers will approach us about things that they like us, they want to talk to us about it, so have you got any ideas? And maybe we haven't really worked in that space before, but we see this opportunity. And in those situations, we're reaching inside Amazon and saying, hey, can you folks help us out with this opportunity, and piecing that together? And it happens the other way around as well. I mean, a lot of the times the AWS team doesn't have the bandwidth to be able to go as deep as the customer needs to actually support them. And when you have that level of trust, the customer almost forgets, who's the partner, who's AWS in the room, and the message is very, very similar. And it's a little easier said than done to get this right. And like I said, it is a lot easier if you're an all-in kind of AWS partner. But I would encourage people, especially when you're starting out, when you're building just new relationships in new areas, really kind of focus on sort of give, just lay it out there, give the information that you have about the customer, good or bad, any concerns you have around the account, put that out there, and then you'll be surprised at how quickly that can kind of forge trust with the AWS team. And to be honest, we've found very little overlap, really. I mean, this drawing here is kind of an example of areas where people may look at that and say, well, Amazon has their own ProServe team and a partner has their project team. How can they not compete, or the support teams competing? But we've just found ways to work through that. And yeah, there is some overlap, but when you're connected together, the ultimate kind of value that you create of working as that single unit sort of far surpasses the opportunity if you were sort of in there as separate pockets, kind of trying to do your own thing. So conclusion, I guess, is really earn trust, build that connected team with Amazon, and I think you'll find that customers respond really well to that, and it actually helps, especially in compete situations, to secure the win. That can be the difference maker. We've definitely seen that quite a few times.
So number 7 is about really continuous improvement and optimization. And we want to introduce you to this program, AWS program, that has been around for a little while now, well architected. And just has become a really, really core part of, once the project's delivered, once the customer is, starting to derive some of that value, how can we squeeze even more value from that and make sure that it has been implemented in the right way? Are there any sort of, from a security point of view, or are there any optimizations that you can drive for the customer within their environment that they have? And this has become a critical part of Rich's business, at One Strategy, in using this as a sales tool, but also as this optimization tool with his customers.
Yeah, I love to talk about the well-architected program. How many of you are familiar with the well-architected program? Okay, that's good. If you didn't raise your hand, you should be. I'm going to introduce you to it today, but it's something you should absolutely be paying attention to. So just in brief, for those of you that haven't heard of it, the well-architected program is essentially a collection of best practices that's been gathered over the last 11 plus years of AWS experience from customers. It comes from experiences where a customer maybe has an outage or they experience some disruption in service, and they do a root cause analysis, and that root cause analysis then feeds into these best practices as they start to notice patterns of things that ultimately could have resulted in the customer following these best practices. It's based upon 5 pillars, right? So you have pillars like operational excellence, and this is to focus on things like config management. You have a security pillar. You dive into and look at and analyze how are you doing security from a standpoint of encryption. How are you doing user access? It provides you with some best practices that ultimately can feed into your compliance around PCI or HIPAA, for example. So a very, very important fundamental. The process of the architecture review is typically like an interview where we sit down and discuss with the customer in a non-threatening way about what are the areas that you're facing challenges, and they focus on these pillars. You talk about reliability. This is about talking and looking at the areas of your business of how are you doing backups? How do you do disaster recovery? What's your business continuity plan? Ultimately, looking inside of the details of what that is from how reliable is the solution that you're running inside of AWS. Performance efficiency is looking at how are you utilizing the resources that you have provisioned in AWS, and how do you determine what those resources are? How do you pick an instance size and the best practices that customers have used to determine what of the instance sizes, what size and type of storage should they be using for their solution? And then you have cost optimization. Cost optimization is pretty self-explanatory. It's about reducing costs and being as optimized as you possibly can. It's about looking for usage of technologies like spot instances or reserved instances from a pricing mechanism or even auto-scaling, for example. And that's really what those areas focus on, these pillars and the interview questions. A couple of examples of customers that we've worked with on this. The Seattle Times is a great example because this is actually the program that we use to cut their bill by 60%. When you work with an executive and you cut their bill by 60%, it's much easier to schedule a meeting with them saying, hey, I have something that I'd like to show you, and then being more agreeable to do that. So it gives you the ability to earn the trust of the leadership and the individuals that you're working on. So that absolutely was something that was important. How many of you guys have heard of rover.com? Anybody use these guys? I love rover.com. Honestly, they have one of the coolest businesses. They're a network of pet sitters and dog walkers. So they ultimately give you connections to people that want to help take care of your animal if you're going on vacation, an alternative to using boarding services, for example. Going into their office is one of the coolest experiences ever. There are dogs everywhere. And if you don't have one, people ask you questions like, where's your dog? So anyways, it's really an incredible office. They've taken their mission to heart, and dogs are at the heart of everything that they do. We worked with them really about focusing on the reliability and operational excellence. So in that case, we worked on helping them build some templates, automation templates to deploy and configure their infrastructure, templates and guidance around serverless and how to use those things. So really, it's just a focus on those things as well. Let's go to the next slide on that. Additionally, how many of you guys have heard of lenses in the well-architected framework? Okay, not as many of you. So this one's pretty awesome. There's actually two lenses. There's actually one for high-performance compute, and there's one for serverless. And what these do is they actually focus the questions or the interview and that process on some specific type of technology use. So for example, in serverless, the questions are not so much about how do you select what instance type, but how are you deploying your Lambda functions? How are you leveraging the frameworks that are available for serverless? So it changes the focus of the review into something that is more specific to the new or more modern technologies that you're starting to see. Boostability is a customer of ours. They actually do search engine optimization. So when you type in a keyword and it's at the top of the list, they help businesses actually reach the top of those lists when you search for them. They have one of my favorite experiences. We actually did a serverless, well-architected review on one of their workloads and had some great results, helped them understand step functions and really some ways to optimize that. But as far as serverless goes, they're one of the best cases that I've worked with. They cut their bill by 94% with the serverless re-architecture. They had 10,000 WordPress sites running. As you can imagine, the administration, the overhead, all of the costs that goes into running those. But in AWS and EC2 spend alone, they're spending more than $20,000 a month hosting these websites. When they went through this whole serverless first focused approach, they ended up with services like Lambda, S3, CloudFront, and Route 53 as kind of the core of that same engine, delivering the same content, and ultimately ended up going from $20,000 a month to less than $200 a month, which is significant, right? These are the types of engineering efforts that AWS, with a little bit of effort, you can capture the value of that. I think we're ready to go on to the next one. So why well-architected? As I mentioned, I'm super passionate about this. It helps you build a backlog with your customers. So when you go into an engagement or you do a review with them, you'll come out with this list of here are the things that you need help with, and I'm here to help you with that. You can build an SOW off of the items that you identify inside of that review. It also changes behavior, right? So when you start to ask a customer about, are you using multi-factor authentication in your root account? And they say no. And you say, okay, have you heard of, and you start to mention companies that weren't following that best practice, who no longer are in existence. They have a tendency to pay attention to that, and oftentimes by the end of that review, they will have turned on MFA while you're sitting there, right? So knowledge changes behavior. It puts the customer in a space of proactive, right? To be proactive in something, to not wait until there's some issue. It gives them the ability to look at their problems from a forward-thinking stance instead of I really wish I had turned on MFA in my account, right? So those types of things are really powerful. It helps customers not only identify risk. Identifying risk is actually pretty easy if you think about it. It's like, okay, I know that that's a problem. I know that I should do something about it. It's a whole nother thing to be able to identify how to solve that risk, and that's what the framework gives you. It gives you the ability to say, here's the best practice, and here's how you address this security risk. The learning element is one of my favorite parts. I love teaching customers. I absolutely am a fan of, if you teach a man to fish, you will feed them for life. And that is what we do in these reviews. We teach our customers that ultimately there are better ways to do this. I tell my team when they do a review, if you walk out of that review and that customer hasn't learned anything, that is not a success. We show them examples of how to cost optimize. We give them examples of how customers are selecting instance sizes. We show them tips and tricks how to switch from provisioned IOPS to GP2 to get the same level of 10,000 IOPS in performance. We do these things and we teach them. And out of that teaching experience with these standards, you really get a great momentum for that customer. So you can tell I'm passionate about it, but I'm also going to say this. What does it do, and why would I recommend that you look at this program? It opens doors. I can't tell you the number of times I've had a customer say, I don't use partners. I say, okay, that's great. Absolutely, totally understand that. I completely understand. Let me just tell you about what we do and kind of the well-architected review. And I explain the program to you similarly as I am doing with this. And by the end of that, they said, honestly, I think I'm really interested in that. Could you get me a statement of work to come in and do that? I'm like, oh, you don't use partners, but we're going to do this engagement with you, right? So it opens a door that otherwise would not be open. So it's really a pretty powerful way to do that. As I've mentioned, we live in this on-demand world. Honestly, waiting for a package to arrive the same day that you order it now is something that people are so used to. And you need to be able to have this value. This shows value. You're coming in and saying, customer, you have these challenges. I can help you with them. You're delivering that value up front. So if you're not really convinced yet on how this builds trust and all of that, final statistic I'd give you is in 2017, our revenue, 40% of it was tied to or related to work that came from well-architected reviews. Significant number for that. So the last piece I would share with you is really a quote from a customer, because if you don't believe me, you should believe the customer. The words of Mike Mitchell here from F5 Networks. And these guys, they do all kinds of amazing things. They sell appliances inside of the AWS marketplace. Notice the emphasis on our expertise and value to them as a customer, right? And this review is just a mechanism for the customer to recognize that value and establish that relationship. And thanks for the opportunity to talk about that, Rob.
Thanks. And if anybody wants more information, I think you've heard, Rich is very passionate and one of our best well-architected partners. If you want more details, we'll flash up some email addresses at the end of this, and would love to connect you with the right people in your country who can help you connect into the program. We have an enablement program that can help take you through sort of how to build your partnership around well-architected. So I think it really is powerful. So the last two best practices that we want to introduce is this one of the end of the project is just the beginning. I've seen a number of, especially the smaller partners that are sort of just starting out, where you're very, very focused on the technology and delivering a great statement of work, a great project. And what tends to happen is, whoever's leading that project for you tends to be probably more technology oriented, and tends to be very, very heads down on that project, focused on getting to that sign-off, getting the statement of work signed at the end of that project, and then exit out of the customer. And I think that's just such a sad, it's sad for that partner, because there is so much additional opportunity in these customers. You may have been delivering a standard migration or just migrating a standard website or whatever it is that you've been doing. But if you think there are 125 other core services that AWS has, and it may be sort of looking out and thinking, wow, the head of contact center, the head of the internal help desk, maybe I can go and pitch AWS Connect into that kind of audience. It could be the CMO or some sort of line of business marketing function where you can go and help them with ML models to go and drive propensities to purchase or drive foot traffic within stores. Or within the fraud department, and going to help them with their ML and AI models to, how can they build those models to detect fraud within their organization. So there are just so many use cases and so many ideas. And I really encourage you guys and encourage your teams as they focused on these projects, just raise the head, look around and, see and build those contacts, to build that next project. So let's get on to the final one. And hopefully you guys have had an opportunity to attend some of the sessions this week and have gone and learned more about what the offerings are within the AWS Partner Network, our AWS Partner Program, APN. There are a number of programs that are there and set up, like well-architected, but also our competency programs, our certifications, building your way through the tiers. And if you haven't been able to attend some of these sessions, especially those of you who said, you're very, very new to reInvent and probably new to this AWS world, most of these sessions are available via rebroadcast. Go and dive into those and go and find out more about them, because they can really help you build your practice. And these are things that have helped Rich and Stephen get to that premier tier within the program. And that really gives them a lot of credibility with the sales force and a lot of the tools and the strength to be able to build their business. So I'll leave you with a core question. I started with that sort of think big goal of 50 million. And I encourage you guys to just sort of think back to that goal. It may be slightly different for you. You may want to set a different goal for your team. But what we do in AWS is we set these big, audacious goals for ourselves, knowing that there's a good chance that we may not quite get to that goal. And that's usually, but we'll get damn close if we miss it. But part of it is you have to set these big, audacious goals. Again, if you're in, no matter what country you're in, no matter what sort of size of organization you are today, there definitely is a lot of opportunity around this community, this partner community, and customers need your help and need your help in that cloud journey. It's definitely about customer obsession, and I think this is also a great differentiation point for all of you. As we focus on the customer and winning and re-winning those customers every day, you'll see that those customers earn the trust, and so on. They become really sort of deeply, deeply reliant on your skills and deeply trusting of your advice. Rich mentioned saving 90% of a cost, or the significant cost savings out of some of these businesses. And you can imagine your next appointment and the sort of level of discussion, rather than having arrived on November 30th and saying, hey, have I got a big fat deal that I need you to sign? That's not a great trust building mechanism. It is if you're sort of helping them in their business and driving those business outcomes. And we as an organization, we really want to see you guys succeed. I'm very passionate about this. I love meeting with partners. I get to chat to partners on a day-to-day basis. It's just so encouraging to see entrepreneurs who've started businesses around this and built some really, really amazing businesses that are have deep specialist skill, and who we actually are starting to really heavily rely on in our major markets, and they're an important part of our go-to-market, and we want to see you guys get there as well. So hopefully these 9 have been very useful for you. We're pretty much out of time. What we would like to do is, rather than open up for questions, very, very happy to take, you've got our email addresses up there. Would love to hear from you. Otherwise, if you want to sort of come up front and sort of corner Rich or Stephen or myself, we'd be very keen to chat to you guys. So good luck, and best of luck in the partner program and this journey. Thank you.